Today we're going to paint a skeleton in a sweater. It's a fun little painting using acrylics. Get our pencil and draw out our basic lines for a skeleton, and there are plenty of images on the internet of skeletons and skulls to use as a reference. I've been messing around drawing weird things since I was a kid, and I love drawing stuff like this, and if you're watching this, you probably do too, or at least interested in it. So use your pencil, draw out the lines. You can go back and fix these up anytime during your painting. Acrylics, they'll pretty much cover up any pencil or marker lines once you start adding layers over the top. They're pretty opaque. And once we get our pencil lines that we like, we go with a permanent marker and go over the top of those. Make sure your ink in your marker doesn't bleed out when you put wet paint over the top of it. There are all kinds of markers. They have millions of different ones you can purchase, but once we get our marker line down, we erase those lines. Now we're using some blue and red for our horizon. Make a nice dark magenta color. That'll be the top part of our background, the horizon, and a little bit of yellow and red for the lower part, kind of like a sunset. We're blending a little bit there, and now we're going to make some dark clouds with some blue and red. Make a dark magenta with a little bit of black, and we get our round brush, and you want your bristles to be mostly dry, and just tap the tips of the bristles in and kind of feather them out. You don't want them to be uniform. Look at some pictures of clouds as a reference if you need to, and make them sporadic. And remember to keep your brush mostly dry. Just dip the tips in there, because with acrylic you can go and layer it if you need to darken it up. Now we're going to mix some red and yellow. Make a nice bright orange color. More reddish orange. And we're going to use the same technique, keeping your bristles mostly dry. And we're going to add some highlights on the bottom of those clouds. And we went with a darker orange. You want it to be almost the same color as your background, but maybe just a little bit lighter. This red, when it dries, it'll be a little darker than it looks when it's wet. And you can go and layer that up to your liking. Just add layer after layer, and before you know it, you'll have what you're looking for. We mixed up some yellow, red, and blue, mostly yellow, and then a lot of white to make a milky bone color, and we're adding that down as our base. And you can use that and layer it up and mess around and see what your highlights are going to look like. Acrylics are pretty cool because you can make a mistake, and then if you don't like it, go and add some more layers of different colors, and you can cover up your mistakes. And there are a couple examples of that in this video. Now we're mixing some red, blue, and yellow again, our primary colors, and getting a dark brown. So you got your red, yellow, and that makes orange. A little bit of blue makes brown. If you want to lighten that up, add more yellow. But we're using that brown and putting in some shadow areas here. And the wetter your brush is, the more the paint will flow, and it's a little bit of trial and error will go a long ways. And don't get discouraged if it doesn't look the way you want to at the first stroke of your brush. Like I said before, with acrylics you can go back and add layer over layer to cover up those brush lines, as you can see me doing here. The brush lines that were there with the base shadows kind of disappear once you add a coat of the yellow over the top, and then you can add more brown over the top of your yellow and just keep going. It's pretty cool. We're using that yellow to get some base shadows in. We got lighter brown, adding some more base shadows, and you can see the features of the skull starting to pop out a little bit once you start doing this. And you can spend as much time or as little time as you want making your skull look as detailed as you want it to. And acrylics are pretty good for that. And you don't need expensive acrylics. The acrylic paint I bought were less than $1 a tube for the paints. And I live in Japan, so everything's in yen, so we call it the 100 yen store, which is the equivalent of the dollar store in America. But yeah, I went to the 100 yen store and bought my paints, and most of my brushes I bought at the 100 yen store as well. But you don't need a lot of money to get into this, and you can have a lot of fun. Got some white and just adding a few highlights here. And if you overdo your highlights, like I do sometimes, you can just go and cover them up with a milky color of something else and see how that looks. Remember, with acrylics it doesn't have to be perfect every time, because you can go and cover up stuff to fine tune it, if you will. Now we're adding some really dark brown, almost black. We added some black in there, and getting some nice dark contrasting shadows going. And you see me tuning that left eye socket, getting that circle a little larger to match the one on the right, and adding a few base shadows in the left inner jaw area and right jaw area where it hinges to the bottom of the skull. We got some brown here, doing a little more blending. Now it's time for the sweater. Yellow and blue make green, of course, and a little bit of white to make it a little more opaque. And I like the light base colors are great, because you can go back, and once you start adding the dark colors, it'll really start giving your whatever you're painting some depth, because you have those highlights standing out and contrasting with your dark areas. And you'll see that here. Now we're using that same technique we use for the clouds, and just dipping the tip of our brush in that slightly darker green, and we're just tapping in the arm areas and the lower chest areas and doing a little bit of dry brush blending. And it looks kind of blotchy right now, but it will look better the more we add to it. Adding a little shadow for the collar, and you just have a lot of fun with acrylics, just putting layer on top of layer to get these details to stand out. And if you overdo anything, you can go and cover up whatever mistakes you've made by adding another coat or another layer of color. Now we have some pretty dark green, like a dark the forest green, adding some more details in. You can see me adding some stitching lines in the sweater, and that's the cool thing. I said it before, you can just add as many details as you want. And doing stuff like this, it's a lot of fun. I kind of overdid the shadow on the collar, but you'll see later in the video I'll go and lighten that up. Just continue adding your texture and your shadows with that dry brush blending until you're content with what you have. Now we're going to paint the tie. I'm not a fashion designer, but I thought a nice lime green tie would look okay with a green sweater. And we got our base color for the tie. We'll go over the top of that and use that same dry brush blending technique. It's more of a stippling technique, and we're adding some light mint color to the top of that, and getting the highlights to stand out a little bit more. I got a dark green. We'll add a little line for the tie, slight little line there. Now we're using that same mint color we used for the highlight on the tie. We'll use that to make a shirt, make the base color for the shirt anyway. And right now you don't have a lot of detail in your shirt, but we'll go and add some shadows and highlights over the top, and before you know it, it'll start looking more like a shirt. And those shadows were a little harsh under the collar, so what do you know? Put a lighter coat of green on it and it makes them less harsh. I thought it'd be fun to put a little pattern on the shirt. Adding little details like this is a blast. I love doing it. And don't forget the inside of the collar. And you don't want to just dip your paint in pure red paint. You want to dilute it with a little bit of water, or else you'll have these huge red lines on your pattern. You want them to be kind of faint. And I'm using brown for the other lines. Now I'm just floating some light brown, watery, very watery mixture over the top of the shirt to darken it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the painting and possibly even learned a thing or two. Take care. Bye bye.